And then he wants you to believe that the bullet that comes through the back window is in fact the bullet that killed Robert Wright. Mark Edwards. And how do we know that that's not true? Well, we can look at the height of the bullet and draw a straight line through to get an idea where that bullet went. But how do we really know it's not true? Move back to the image. It's because Talisha Mills tells you that in fact, that she's sitting in the car, and when she hears a gunshot, Raquel says, "Everybody duck." And she does. And when she ducks, she can see Robert Wright in the back seat. And when she's looking at him, she sees him get shot in the head while he's bent over like this. And that's the only way that this could have happened, is exactly what Talisha Mills tells you. They bent over like this, and the bullet comes through his forehead, enters the rear, and leaves this blood spatter on the door. Because for their story to be true, that means that Mark Edwards had to be sitting up in the back seat, turned around, facing the back, and the bullet had to come through his head, which would have caused spattering on the back of the front the passenger seat. And we know that there is no spattering there. And that for this to be caused, that he would have to somehow, after being shot in the head, turn, and before falling, spit up blood to create this spatter pattern. And how do we know that didn't happen? Because Talisha Mills tells us. And that would be pretty memorable if he turned around and spat out blood. And how do we know where the person who shot the bullet had to be positioned? Somewhere right here, near the driver's door, or right behind it, that little sliding door. That's where the person had to be. And what happened on that day? Who pulled the trigger to the gun that killed Mark Edwards? I don't know. Maybe when Reg fired back, the person ducked, and somehow their gun discharged, accidentally killing Mark Edwards. And how do we know that the person was standing here? Because Joe Slemko told us that. And he told us that before he had any information, any testimony from Talisha Mills, or any of the details of this case. Because that's what experts do. They take the objective evidence and they do an analysis. Because they don't want to have any bias. They don't want to be swayed by witness statements, testimony, police reports. Those are the things that create bias and can cause preconceived notions, and then can lead a person to try to verify what's already been told them instead of recreating it and figure out what happened. And who is Joe Slemko? And why did he travel? And who is Joe Slemko? Well, we know Joe Slemko. You have his curriculum vitae, so you know that he's an expert's expert. And what do experts do? They do research. They do research because there's a question that they're curious about and they need an answer to. And he did research on blood stains on fabric, the effects of dropout velocity, and fabric composition. This was like a 2 or 3 year research project that was published and peer reviewed. And when they make a report and give an opinion, they put color photos in it. So therefore, if somebody wants to review their report, they have the evidence in the report. So that way they can give an independent opinion if they want to. That's what true experts do. He's also referenced in this book, Bloodstain Pattern Analysis, written by Tom Bevel, who coincidentally is the person who taught the last real course, in 2006, that Guy Nutter attended a bloodstain pattern analysis. And why did Joe Slemko fly 2,000 miles? What did he come here to tell us? He came here to tell us exactly this: that the bloodstain pattern in the van could only have been caused one way. And that is that the person had to have their head down below the level of the seat, ducking, looking up, and the bullet had to come from somewhere over here because of the angle of the spatter pattern. And when he made this analysis, he did it with 6 photos. He did it with this photo, so therefore it gave him a bullet height right there. He also used these 2 photos. Well, of course that photo, but these 2 photos. And why is this one significant? Because this is where Mark Edwards was seated. And there's no blood anywhere on the seat where Mark Edwards is sitting. And there's no spatter on the back of the chairs. And this one's significant because of the white bag and the armrest. That if it happened like the prosecutor wants you to believe it happened, there would have to be spattering somewhere in these areas. And the pink CD player had to have been moved after Mark Edwards was shot, because that is spatter. And even Guy Nutter agrees with that. But then, when he got more pictures in January, and how did we know that he got more pictures in January? Because remember when I asked Detective Hampton, who went to the garage to inventory the van? He didn't know. But we know who the person's name is now, McNary. And how do we know that? Because of this photo. Did Detective Hampton know that when he was on the stand in December? I don't know. Did he misplace the pictures and not give them to the prosecutor? Or did the prosecutor simply choose not to give them to me? I don't know. But when he does get the next set of photos, the only one that's of real significance is the one that shows the back chair of the front passenger seat. Because again, there's blood running down, but there is no spatter. And clearly, that is called transferred blood. Somebody, as he showed you, put their hand up there, most likely with a bloody hand. And that's how that pattern was created. But there is no spattering there. Oh, I forgot to do that. DeJuan Burke's statement.
That's mine.
Okay, so no, all right.
Yep.
And then because Joe Slemko came here, they had to call Guy Nutter. And who is Guy Nutter? Well, we know that according to his curriculum vitae, he has many areas of expertise. And we know that he's allegedly testified 8 times before in bloodstain pattern analysis, but we don't know when the first time was or when the last time was. And we know that he attended expert witness school in 2001 and took a class called Courtroom Techniques, Success Instead of Survival. Maybe that's where they taught him that when a judge gives the defense attorney a limited amount of time, that when a question calls for a yes or no, to ramble on, burning up that precious time and causing the defense lawyer frustration. But I thought being an expert was having special knowledge and coming to tell the jury something that they didn't know that would enlighten them to help them seek the truth. So if that's what it is, then an expert witness course can be limited down to about 2 minutes, because it have 2 requirements. First, be an expert in whatever field they choose to be an expert in. And second, tell the truth. Don't go to a courtroom and try to confuse people. Because isn't that the most important thing in this courtroom, people? the truth. Now, when I got up during lunch after Guy Nutter testified, I was pretty angry. I was pretty hot with him. And my partner Bill said, "Hey Dan, take it easy. Because look at Guy Nutter. Look at the position he's been put in. 10 years, his entire career with the Michigan State Police. Look at the position they put him in. Imagine what it had been like for him, with his limited knowledge of bloodstain pattern analysis, being handed a report from a world-class expert and saying, we need you to somehow poke holes in this report to contradict it. And if I'd really taken this advice to heart, I might have started off with a question. Guy, must be pretty tough. They put you in a pretty tough position here today, haven't you? To have to come here and try to tell this jury that Joe Slemko's wrong. But in fact, he didn't say that at all. He said, I can't say he's wrong, but I can't say he's right. I'm inconclusive. But what else do we know about him? We know that he's never held an opinion contrary to the prosecution. And how do we know that? Because if he had, wouldn't the prosecutor have asked him to show his impartiality? That he had 6 days to review Joe Slemko's report before coming here on January 11th. And at that time, on January 11th, it was still his belief, because he told me so when I talked to him, that it was expectorant blood. And he still holds on to that opinion today. That he's sitting there with the prosecutor, helping him prepare his cross-examination. And the prosecutor asked questions like, well, is it possible he was hanging from the ceiling? That it was expectorant blood. A Nick cap. There's never been any testimony about a Nick cap. Because for Guy Nutter's theory to be correct, when the bullet goes through the head of Mark Edwards, it would spatter all over the front of the passenger seat. So if something was blocking it there. But we know that there's no evidence. There's nothing that says anything was there blocking that spatter. That's how we know that Guy Nutter his opinion that bullet could come from the back window is absolutely wrong. Take it a week to write a report. I wonder how many other bloodstain pattern analysts reviewed this report before it was given to Guy Nutter. But most importantly was the autopsy report. Because remember, his opinion is there's either expectorant blood or spatter as a result of a gunshot. And the autopsy report says respiratory system. The larynx and trachea were unremarkable. There was passive congestion in the pericardia that was accentuated by dependent lividity. I asked him that question. I said, do you know what that means? And he said, no. And I tell him, doesn't that mean that blood has pooled in the lungs after death because circulation has stopped? And he says, yeah. What happens if I didn't know what that meant? Where would that leave you? And how do we know that it was not expectorant blood or expectorated blood, whatever you want to call it? Because there are things to look for with expectorant blood, which are, at times these patterns can mislead an inexperienced analyst. Oftentimes, there's less vivid in its coloration. There's no evidence of that in the photo at the side of the door of the van. There may be evidence of air bubbles or popped air bubbles. None of that. There's no evidence of that. Mucus strands, spine-like interconnections between individual spatter stains may be present. We didn't see any of those. There was no serology test done for amylase. Can occur when a victim receives a bleeding injury to the mouth, nose, throat, or lungs and continues to breathe. Spatter may result. We know that Mark Edwards did not get an injury to any of those places. But mostly we know, if, however, no evidence of blood is found in the airway, either at the scene or during an autopsy, expectorated blood is excluded as a possible source of the spatter. That's how we know that Guy Nutter, as much as he wants to say he doesn't agree with Joe Slemko, he actually does agree. Because he only has two possibilities. And this, from his own training, thank God I had that book on bloodstain pattern analysis that he was trained with. We can rule out expectorated blood. So therefore, the only way that this bloodstain pattern could have been created is just like Talisha Mills and just like Joe Slemko told you is the only way. Now, one of the jury instructions has to do with reasonable doubt. And it's around here somewhere, but I'm afraid it might have gotten lost here. This is the jury instruction that we're practicing about the presumption of innocence. It means a person accused of crime is presumed to be innocent. We all talked about that in the beginning a little bit, and as difficult as it is to do, but it really means that every witness that the prosecution puts up, you have to presume that they're either mistaking or lying. Every crime is made of parts called elements. It's a prosecutor must prove each element of crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And that means when you're back there deliberating and there's evidence that you wish you had to make this decision and you don't blame Reginald, because we try to give you all the information we can, but you blame the prosecutor.